I'm curious. So when you add a table, FileMaker adds a layout for that table automatically. Is it not doing that?
No, and I don't
Oh.
know if that is a problem with my sequel or if that is the way FileMaker handles things, right? Because
Oh,
again, this is just like this entire project has been 20 minutes of my life and a couple hours of Claude chugging away. So it creates the tables, it will create the table occurrence, but then, I mean, I've created that invoice table through here since then, right? And it's still got my old layouts from before I deleted those tables, but it does not have the invoices layout.
interesting.
So
you could do something. It could save you potentially a decent amount of time if you told it, create me all of the tables typically associated with a sales.
yeah, that's what I did earlier, right?
Yeah.
So if we clear this back out real quick. Let's see what it does with that simple of a prompt.
Which model is this talking to?
This one is the free version of Gemini, which also could be a limiting factor, right?
Yeah. You're not asking a very complex question right here anyway.
No, I'm not. And it just generated these 5 tables, each with a decent number of fields to it.
And did I see you're using Gemini 3 Flash?
I believe that's what I've got it set to. It was whatever I could do with
the
free.
model.
Yeah, Flash is the latest version of Flash.
Yeah, that's pretty decent actually. So I wouldn't think that would be holding you back.
Well, it's going to hold you back from, probably in a speed perspective, and then like a reasoning perspective. If I turn this loose on an established client, right? Like if I ran it on seed system and told
no, I wouldn't.
Yeah, well, if I was doing like a read-only mode and told it to explain the calculations on those tables to me or something, or identify issues with it, I don't know that I would trust Gemini Flash for that. That's a lot of reasoning.
Yeah, you'd want to use like the most recent model. There's no reason to risk using a dumb model.
Exactly.
Because the amount you're going to pay for it is minuscule in comparison to the problems you're going to run into the moment you try to use a not so smart model.
Yeah. I guess it was you, Zaman, that brought up the idea of using this to build web viewers. That's a beautiful option, so long as whoever is using FileMaker is not expecting to use it in WebDirect. Because as soon as you start doing anything complex in web viewers on WebDirect fail to load. I ran into that a couple of times. Like, I was building an interface for recently, and when I tried to open it on WebDirect, what Claude had built me that looked gorgeous inside FileMaker Pro would not load. And some quick research into it was like just the difference in the way they handle iframes and stuff like that, or in some security stuff. In any event, this is a taste, I think, of what we could ask of it and what we could do with it, right? This originally built it out as a plugin and an orchestrator that was a node service that was having to run separately, but I've since integrated the two. So this is just a plug and play plugin, a typical FileMaker plugin. So I've got to play with some different models and make sure that the API keys and the plugin settings are interchangeable. I told it to, but I haven't actually validated that. So if you really can say, oh, use Anthropic's latest model, and here's my API key for it, that's going to be awesome.
I guess with that, has anybody had any success building layouts with AI, or even generating like I only asked because I was doing this. I asked AI to using Gemini as well to how would they refactor a layout to be more modern and to have more intuitive user interface. And its description was great. Its example was atrocious. I do wonder, as far as graphic work, I wonder if anybody has had any good success within FileMaker's limitations.
I have not. Well, except for web viewers, right? Web viewers are beautiful. All this editing for scripts and a lot of the data that this AI is pulling is proprietary XML formats. And I know the layouts are in the same, or in a proprietary format, I should say. I would assume that you could have an AI generate a web page or something like that, and then tell it to convert to that XML format, and then you would be able to copy and paste it. Because that's actually something I'm going to try now. I'll report back on Tuesday in the next meeting if I've been able to get this AI to work that way.
Okay.
Because, yeah, you can copy items between layouts, so I know the XML is copyable.
Right.
Can you copy? No, it won't even let me select that. You can duplicate layouts from here, but you can't copy anything from here, I don't think.
No, they've never had import export for layouts. It's been a frustrating whack for a long time.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say if you could do that, then maybe you'd just be able to paste it in as a whole XML document, like I can a script over here.
One wonders if you could. Even if it can't create the layout, if you could create the objects to paste in, that could be a.
Well, yeah, and that's the route I'm going to go, right? If you just have a standard width layout and you tell it what the dimensions of that layout are,
I have a question.
Go ahead.
The ability to so easily create a plugin is interesting. Has anybody seen that in any blog posts or anything from FileMaker or anything like that?
I have not. It's actually I was pretty surprised that I haven't seen anything like that, because
I was saying, I'm just wondering, just as an example, Annie was asking about creating barcodes this morning, and we've discussed barcodes for a little bit, and one of the options for barcodes is plugins, and we've steered clear of that. I think a variety of reasons, the cost and the hassle of managing plugins. But if you can create a plugin that does whatever you want for free, does that change anyone's thinking about whether we would use a plugin for something like a barcode or whatever? Anybody's thoughts on that? You still have to manage the distribution of the plugin, which is a bit of a hassle, but
right.
I hadn't really considered my viewpoint on plugins since AI started making it easy to make them, but that does kind of change the game a little bit.
It does.
I think it does. There's still not a big hassle to. The ability to install them off the servers. We haven't used them much in a long time, but as far as I know, the ability to install them off the server is still pretty easy these days.
And you could even store it inside of a container field in the database and then install it there.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because you can copy and paste the layouts directly into a container, right? So if you built the layout in the format for being able to copy and paste it, there isn't any reason you couldn't actually just put it in a container, and then you just have to copy and paste it out of the container into the layout.
Oh, I was talking about the plugin installer.
Oh, the plugin installer. Oh yeah, there you go. Container part there, yeah.
Yeah. But the layouts, I think you could actually, if the XML is formatted correctly, I think you could actually just paste, straight into the layout, instead of having to go the container route.
Yeah, just paste directly in. The container would just give you I don't know why I was thinking container, but I was just thinking of the process that you could store layouts in containers and be able to use those to replicate it, then copy from one system to another,
Mm,
versus actually having to recreate the layout. And so there's that sort of like workaround process. But yeah, if you're able to put into the clipboard the actual XML, then
Yeah, so to the barcode plugin idea specifically, what are we looking for in a plugin that we've been unable to achieve without one?
The three, I'm going to call them leading approaches to barcodes. The add-on that FileMaker makes available for free. We recently tried using the 2 for-U calculation stuff for doing barcodes, and then I think using an API to get a barcode image. We haven't really tried that approach, but it's a pretty theoretically straightforward one. But that obviously requires access to the API, which might not always be there. The FileMaker add-on relies on the existence of a web viewer, and the JavaScript code doesn't run in the web viewer in certain circumstances. You have to have a user interface. That object has to be on a layout, and so if you're doing certain kinds of programming where you're trying to create the barcode, but you don't really have a user interface around that you're using at that point in time, the add-on introduces the overhead of having to manage getting to a layout and everything for that. Whereas if you had a simple plugin where you could pass a value and get back a code 39 image of the barcode, it would eliminate that dependency, or it would eliminate that user interface JavaScript web viewer dependency.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure that it is possible.
What's to stop us from making a plugin to do any subset of what MBS does that we need in a particular project?
Right.
Whether it's merging 2 PDF documents or creating a barcode, or it's an interesting.
Yeah, because what MBS plugin, they just use like DynaPDF, I think, that DynaPDF library. So what if we made our own DynaPDF plugin? Just that.
Yeah, really interesting possibility, especially given Evan's demonstration of how little effort it took.
Right.
yeah, when you don't have to think about actually writing the code, you just have to tell it what you want. What can you do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The biggest issue I ran into this was Claude not knowing that much about FileMaker specifically. So there was instances where I had to go, like, its research did not find what it needed, right? So its syntax for creating indexes via SQL was not the way FileMaker does it. So I had to give the text for that.
Do they have documentation though? Does FileMaker have any documentation, or is there any documentation that you could reference to assist in that sort of build? I guess that would maybe just be another research function to let Claude dive down into that hole deeply.
No, all the documentation you need exists. Claude just had a harder time finding it because this is a niche market, right?
Yeah, I mean, before you prompt it though, like getting all that research, knowing you need to have all of the XML possible for everything you can get on FileMaker basically to seed it before you even start building anything FileMaker-esque. Like
Sure.
give it the root documents of everything that is FileMaker, and use those as the tomb that it's going to like create stuff on, versus on the fly sending an agent out to look at a FileMaker process, or relying on a MCP or a skill to go and gather that information. Just build your own MCP or your own skill that's going to reference that documentation that you've already spent, like let it crank away to build that library of how to work the DSDK, how to get around different things, all that kind of stuff.
Joe, I get whoever was talking about layouts earlier. Claude came back and says it thinks it can do it. I just need to give it some examples of the XML structure, and then we could set it up to tell it to build a web page and then convert that web page to the XML structure, and you'd be able to copy and paste it into FileMaker. So I'm going to have to spend some time on that this evening and tomorrow and see if I can get that to work.
Yeah.
If it does it in a stable and pretty way, that's huge. I'm a little worried about the pretty aspect of it. Like that conversion between a nice CSS and HTML document to what FileMaker can do via XML. Good. That might not be nice.
Interesting question. Yeah.
Yeah, because the experience that I've had with it has a hard time understanding themes. So it creates CSS for every object, and it really, importing that into FileMaker is not. It never worked. Well, it can't get that structure right. And it's because of how FileMaker stores the CSS in its style sheet. It's basically one gigantic style sheet for every themed object in a solution. And if it's not saved to that theme, it's its own CSS definition in the in the layout itself. So it's a hodgepodge essentially of standards. Like two different standardization models. So I think AI just doesn't know how to handle that. I mean, I barely know how to handle that, so I can't expect any FileMaker developer to be able to explain that to an AI assistant in any way.
You can import themes, right? It's been a while since I've done that.
You can.
Yep.
So if you got it to convert a global CSS, if you told it to create the site and then convert a global CSS to whatever FileMaker looks for as a theme, and then imported that, and then told it to make sure that all of the XML elements were assigned an ID to that theme, you could probably get pretty darn close to making something look good right off the bat, and being stylized and not have to worry about that.
Right.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Like if you gave it maybe not even necessarily the whole CSS, but if you made like a simpler like primer document for it that said, hey, you have, part summary type, and these are the different variations of it, or the different styles of it that can be applied, and it knew, this ID corresponds to that object type and style, I think it could do fine just saying, okay, insert that instead of trying to reference the whole CSS file.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no file, right? You can't export a theme.
You kind of can. If you go digging in, well, I don't know where it is on Mac. I know on Windows, like program file in the FileMaker installation folder.
Yeah.
You can find the theme.
I see.
Yeah, it's a style sheet file. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You could actually just have it look at the different styles available for the solution from that folder, right? And then,
yeah.
And then it has the definitions that it needs.
Right. Yeah, it's an actual style sheet file, just a standard style sheet file, and you can modify it. We did it through an Adobe thing we wrote years ago at this point. But yeah, we were able to modify layout with Adobe commands and make a somewhat usable layout. But still, it took so much work for very little results.